Matt Barrows had Scott McLuhan on, and McLuhan is really good at kind of sifting through and seeing things independently and not necessarily going with the flow. And I want to start there with his evaluation because he loves the Jacob Cowing pick from Arizona. He said, man, this guy's fast and he can run routes and he's tough and he's really going to make an impact. And so you read that and you're like, wow, cool. He really likes Jacob Cowing. Then you see he kind of had the same take I had on the Pearsall pick, which is I just liked other receivers better. And I thought they probably could have gone in a different direction position-wise, but he sees the value of Pearsall. But the one that jumped out to me was he thinks Isaac Guerendo may not make the team. And that's interesting because they did trade 2 5s to get into the fourth for that extra fourth-round pick and took Guerendo out of Louisville. And he just said, he might do it on special teams and maybe he can do a couple things, but he's never been the every down back. And he's more of a kind of a size speed freak. And, that's not how I scout. I scout off football tape and off tape. He's going to struggle to make the team. Some very interesting observations. And he didn't look at every single guy in the draft because he didn't look at Mustapha and a couple of the others. But why don't we start there? I mean, what do you think of Guerendo as a draft choice? He ran 4.33. He's 220 pounds. To me, Chase, he looks like a fullback, and I've been saying that all week. They gave him a fullback number, by the way. He's wearing number 49. What do you think? What do you think of the Guerendo pick, and how do you see him fitting in?
I had him going to the Niners in a couple of the mock drafts that I did because of a couple of reasons. You look at the overall athletic ability that he has. He's 6 feet, 221 pounds, and at that size, he's still at the NFL Scouting Combine when I was there in Indianapolis, ran a 4.3 40-yard dash. He is a one-cut runner and a player who sees the hole, hits the hole, and I think that he's a solid scheme fit for Kyle Shanahan. Also has an underrated ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. And Brian Baldinger put out a couple of clips of him contorting his body, going up in the air, and displaying some ball skills that I think a lot of people don't realize he has that to his game. I also think why Kyle Shanahan likes him a lot is because he's a good pass protecting running back too. And Jordan Mason is not that. And I think that's part of the reason why the 49ers have shown a lack of trust in Jordan Mason. I like Mason's game as a runner. Frankly, I think that he should get some more time. I love the boom and the thunder that he brings. I think it's an important combination to have when you have the flash and the overall versatility of a Christian McCaffrey. But there's a reason why the Niners haven't played Mason. Every time he's gotten the football on a carry, he's running for 5-6 yards seemingly, and I think he's really talented in that way, but not a good pass protector and isn't really that dual threat back to catch the ball out of the backfield. Guerendo is that and has that to his game. Where McLuhan might be coming from is that in his entire career in college, and he was in college a long time from 2018 through 2023, he started a total of 1 game at the college level. I do think that that is a little bit of an indictment on him. And I think that some of the physicality and the athleticism that he has, it doesn't always translate to tape. But Bobby Turner does such a great job of developing running backs. So too does Kyle Shanahan. It's a run-heavy scheme in which every running back pretty much has been productive under Shanahan in Atlanta, Washington, San Francisco, where Guerendo can be a solid player. And in a backup role, 132 carries last year, 810 yards, 6.1 yards per carry, 11 touchdowns. And then he also had 22 catches for 234 yards. I think that's a part of his game that could get better. And I think this could be a college player who might be a better pro or remembered more of a pro compared to what he did at Wisconsin and what he did at Louisville, but does run a little bit high. Elijah Mitchell does too. That's why he suffered a lot of those lower body injuries, because he gets cut down below the waist. But I actually like the Guerendo pick. Now, moving a couple of picks in order to take him, and you don't do that for a right tackle in the second round or elsewhere in the draft, I think is a little bit of an issue. They don't have their priorities straight with the offensive line still. But I did like the Guerendo pick, and I'm intrigued by the size and the speed.
Yeah, I am as well. But, and he did average 6 yards a carry, scored 11 touchdowns for Louisville. Here was the quote from McClellan. He said he had a good year, but he's nothing special. Unless he can return kicks and play special teams, I'd be surprised if he makes the team. I mean, that would be a dramatic thing if they wind up cutting Guerrero. Now, McClellan's opinions are his own, and they're not those of John Lynch or the Niners scouting department, and he doesn't always get it right. For the record, he also said he didn't have a high grade on Cody Schrader either from Missouri. He thinks Guerrero's better. He says, but it's close, very close. Cody will outcompete him. I promise you that. What'd you think of Schrader? Because Schrader led the SEC. He was an all-time, first-team SEC running back. That's the best conference in college football by far. You could say it's borderline semi-pro. Yet this kid went undrafted. And when I look at him, I see a lot of the same things I liked about Blake Corum.
Yep.
I like about Cody Schrader. I'm not that concerned about the 4.6 140 because he did it in the SEC against the best athletes in college football. I think the Niners maybe got a steal as an undrafted free agent running back again. They haven't Johnny, the Niner running back coach. What's his name again?
Bobby Turner.
Bobby T.
Yeah.
Loves, he loves the running backs he loves, and he's got a great eye for running back talent. And he sure found a good one, I think, in Schrader.
It's funny that you threw out the Blake Corum comp because I was just about to say that. And where I think that they are very similar is just having those tree trunks for legs and that really strong lower body where they just keep their feet and their legs churning. And because they're short and because they have that lower body strength with the squats, they can keep the pile churning. And they can churn out some of those really difficult yards in that way because they have this relentless drive and relentless competitive nature and this attitude for when they run the football that they are not going to get knocked back. They are not going to have a negative play, and they're going to find a way to find just a sliver of real estate, a sliver of daylight to pick up some positive carries. And Cody Schrader is just the classic Niner when you think about what they prioritize as far as the culture and the makeup of their organization. I thought that showed in this draft with a lot of players who love ball, who are physical, who have played a lot like college football, and just have this willingness to compete. John Lynch even talked about that on the Pat McAfee show on Thursday. And for Schrader, started off at Truman State. He is a no-star recruit. Then he goes to Mizzou as a walk-on, makes the team, and in 2022, his first year at Mizzou, leads the team in rushing after he walked on in January. And then in 2023, that was the breakout season, and he was such a great story last year in college football for a couple of reasons. One, going from 0 stars to Truman State to Mizzou, being a walk-on, but also Mizzou was a really, really good team last year, and it was their best year that they've probably had since Drew Lock and Blaine Gabbert were playing quarterback for that program. He had a 276 carry season, 1,600 plus yards, 14 touchdowns, and he averaged almost 6 yards per carry. You mentioned the 4.6 40-yard dash. He definitely doesn't have the long speed, but he does have that sturdy frame where he'll just run forward. Shanahan, I think, likes that with Elijah Mitchell, where he doesn't dance and isn't overly patient in the backfield, sees the hole, hits it, and he just picks up those 4 or 5 yards. And you don't necessarily need that 4.6 40-yard dash speed to do that. Are you asking him to break away from defenders at that second and third level and be that home run threat? No. But you have other players who can do that on this team, and Isaac Guerrero is one of them. And I think that this running back room is going to be interesting. I don't think Elijah Mitchell's a shoo-in to make the roster. He could get traded or cut. The injuries are a massive issue. I don't think that he had the same pop last year. And then because this coaching staff hasn't trusted Jordan Mason, do they try to trade or do they cut him? On 53-man roster cutdown day, he does give the team special teams ability, but are they going to elect for Guerrero and Schrader over Mitchell and Mason? I think that's going to be an underrated training camp battle.
Yeah, no question. And when I watched Schrader, I mean, I saw him in some of his biggest games. He went for over 5 yards a carry against Georgia. He went for almost 9 yards a carry against LSU, 200-plus yards against Arkansas, 200-plus yards against Tennessee. 29 carries for 128 against Ohio State. I mean, he played some of his best ball against some of the best teams he played against. 5.9 a carry in the SEC this last year, 14 touchdowns, over 1,600 yards. I mean, I'm really eager. He can catch the ball. I mean, he's coachable. He doesn't have the long speed, but I mean, he's got great quickness and production at a really high level. I'm really eager to see him. What did you think of the first pick? What did you think of Pearsall? How did you have him rated going in, and what do you think of the fit?
Yeah, to throw out a couple of big words, I was flummoxed and flabbergasted at the pick because with the way that the board fell, I thought the Niners were going to go best player available, and instead they went with a luxury pick. And I've warmed up to it over time, and I watched your show once I got done, my live show, because I was like, what does Krug think about this pick? Because I had talked about Ricky Pearsall being a second-round selection, and I had mentioned him as a slot option both on my show, the 49ers Report, and with you, because it all came down to what the Niners wanted. Did they want an outside wide receiver? Did they want a slot wide receiver? And we talked about all the different prototypes in this draft, both in the first round and in the second round. And I was looking at the Niners at 31. I wasn't shocked that they went wide out. Earlier in the week, I'd said they might surprise some people. It wouldn't surprise me if they go corner, but Cooper DeJean's there. Kool-Aid McKinstry's there. Adonai Mitchell. Xavier Legette. Those players are on the board. And I think that if you want to talk about raw ability, potential, and upside, their ceiling is a lot higher than Ricky Pearsall. So I would have went with one of those players. I think corner would have helped you a little bit more. I thought if you do go wide receiver, go after a player with upside. Shoot, don't let the Kansas City Chiefs trade in front of you and take Xavier Worthy, because now that's going to be a massive problem as he teams up with Patrick Mahomes. I didn't think that they needed to go offensive tackle at 31 because that run on offensive tackles started to happen in the teens and then in the 20s. So I was fine with not going right tackle there, even though they didn't address that once again in the draft for the second consecutive year. But yeah, I was shocked by the selection of Ricky Pearsall, because nobody had him going in the first round. Nobody had him going to the Niners, but I see why they did it. If it's in addition to Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, I like it a little bit more. If he is your Brandon Ayuk replacement, totally disagree with it. If he's your future Deebo replacement next offseason, I can also see the reasoning behind it. He's tough, good footwork, good release off the line. He lives in the middle area of the field. I think he's more of a slot guy compared to an outside guy. And in the middle area of the field, that's where Brock Purdy's really been able to thrive and flourish, with Kyle Shanahan as the play caller between the numbers and between the hashes. And Ricky Pearsall can cause a lot of damage in that middle area of the field. And why I think it could be a Deebo replacement down the road. You can use him, and Florida did use him with suspect quarterback play, end arounds, jet sweeps, bubble screens. He can be a little bit of a gadget weapon. It helps you on special teams. He has a good vertical leap, 42 inches. He can go up, climb the ladder, get it. I know the Niners love his toughness because he'll take a smack. He'll get right back up, has a little swagger to his game. I like the route running. The short area quickness is certainly there. I'm not just saying this because they're all white dudes, but like you see a little Adam Thielen, you see a little Cooper Kupp, you see a little bit of Julian Edelman. You see maybe a little bit of Tyler Lockett in there. And it's a luxury pick, but it does make your offense a little bit better. And it's a weapon for Brock Purdy to help him maximize his game a little bit.
Yeah, and that's where he lives. He lives in the middle of the field. This guy should help him. I like Xavier Legette more. I would have gone on the line of scrimmage up front. I would have gone Zach Frazier or Michael Hall or Ruka Rororo or, maybe Johnny Newton.
Jackson Powers Johnson was there.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there was two starting centers there. But you know what? To me, Pearsall has a chance to be really effective. I did really like the Renardo Green pick, which made me kind of pause when I saw Kuiper say, hey, he thought that was a 2-round reach. To me, I think they just, the draft people just screwed it up, because this guy should have been like a 3rd-round pick, maybe mid to late 3rd round. Niners took him at the end of round 2 because they don't pick again till the end of round 3, and they really liked him. I like this player a lot. I think this guy's going to play a lot as a rookie. I think he's got potential to play free safety, to play nickel, to play outside. I like a lot of what I see. I'm not even that concerned. I'd rather have a college player that has too many penalties and have to temper it down than a guy whose coverage is soft and he's kind of, you got to kind of rev him up. Renardo Green to me was a nice second round pick. What did you think of the Florida State kid? How much do you think he'll play?
He could play a lot, honestly. And the consistent theme of this draft class, the Niners took a lot of players who have played a shit ton of college football. A lot of 5-year seniors, 6-year seniors. They've drafted a lot of players who are just very experienced at the college level. And I think there's a couple of reasons behind that. If they need to fulfill roles here in 2024, they can. But if they need to step in to more sizable roles in 2025, they can do that. They have a de facto redshirt season here in 2024, but getting acclimated with the NFL level and then playing a lot in college will help them be prepared for 2025, and they'll be cost-controlled options. I thought Pearsall was a reach. I thought Renardo Green was a little bit of a reach, but then you look at Daniel Jeremiah's board and some other people, and while Kuiper had him low, 2-round reach, other people had Renardo Green higher on the list. And the Niners have drafted DBs in recent years who have a level of swagger, confidence, a short memory, which is what I think you need at the cornerback spot because you're going to get beat. It's just a guarantee. You're going to get beat. It's inevitable, but can you flush that bad play? And then can you come back from it? Do you have ball skills? Are you afraid against the run, or are you willing to lower your shoulder, lower your head, and make a play against the run? Are you willing to play multiple positions, and are you capable of doing that? And you look at what the Niners have done in the draft the last couple of years. All the players that they've taken have kind of fit that profile. Renardo Green, Diamador Lenore, Darrell Luter Jr., Samuel Womack. I like the Green pick, and he's one of my favorite selections in this draft, even though I thought it was a little bit of a reach. But if they love the player, they had to take him where they did. Toughness. Can play man press, will drive receivers to the sideline, can play inside outside, led the ACC in pass breakups last year with 14. And if you want him to play in 2024, I think he's capable of doing that because he can play inside outside. That gives you flexibility with where you want to play Diamador Lenore. And if you want to put Lenore on the outside, that's fine. Renardo Green can play the slot. If you want to put Green on the outside, we've seen that Lenore is one of the better slot nickel corners in the entire NFL. And I think on tape, the testing for Green wasn't great in the pre-draft process. He's a little small, 5'11", 186. He ran a 4.5 40-yard dash. But I think he plays with instincts and anticipation really well. And what he did week 1 against Malik Neighbors, who went 6 overall to LSU, was really impressive. He had an interception. He had 1 pass breakup, 2 catches for 20 yards on 5 targets, no touchdowns allowed. And he wasn't afraid to get physical with Malik Neighbors, who some people think is the better wide receiver in this class compared to Marvin Harrison. So I do like the player. I think he's seasoned enough, Pearsall seasoned enough where they can play early as rookies.
Yeah. Who was your favorite pick? I kind of we titled this, favorite picks and least favorite picks. Who's your favorite draft choice that they made?
Just because I'm a believer that you got to fortify the trenches, and because the Niners had such a massive need along the offensive line and they haven't really addressed that position early in the draft the last couple of years, I like the Dominick Puni pick. I like how he can play tackle in a pinch if you need him to. Didn't give up a sack last year, one of 3 left tackles in college football to not do that on 700 plus snaps. He's a good athlete. He moves well. He's comfortable in space, climbing to that second or third level. Good scheme fit. He said after he got taken that he thinks that he can play all 5 positions along the offensive line. And if you look ahead to this year, if you want John Feliciano to take over for Jake Brendel at center, Feliciano has been able to do that. Puni can play right guard. If you want him to take over for Colton McKivitz, he definitely doesn't fit the profile of what the Niners look for and want as far as arm length and wingspan. But he was able to do that at left tackle. He thinks that he can thrive at right tackle. So he can just play all along the line. I like the toughness, too, that he brings. And this is a tough fast draft class that the Niners have. I like the Malik Mustapha pick a lot too. And we haven't talked about Jacob Cowing, but 5'8", 5'9", 4'3", 40. Kyle Shanahan with the Niners hasn't really had that type of wide receiver. And with Garendo, Cowing, Pearsall, the Niners on offense, they got faster. And as we look ahead, the Niners last year ran 3+ wide receiver sets, the second least among all 32 teams in the NFL. I'm wondering, as Shanahan just becomes more mature as a coach and tries to adapt and pivot and adjust, do we start to see a difference in philosophy with the offense here? And does Shanahan look at what's happening across the NFL and say, we needed to get faster? And we're doing that with Pearsall. We're doing that with Cowing. We're doing that with Garendo. And it just makes our offense a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, Cowing was one of my favorite players just because he's small, but he's really productive. And I think he's the kind of guy that has really pure ball skills. And he did it at UTEP. He did it at Arizona. I watched him against ASU in that Territorial Cup game. He lit it up. Then I watched Arizona, Oklahoma in the bowl game. He lit it up in that game. I mean, his last 2 games, he caught like 16 balls for 300 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns. I mean, to me, he's a really excellent receiver. And when you see that kind of speed and production, I mean, it's hard to me. It's like you're looking for 2 things. You're looking for guys who produced in college because it's not a track meet. It's a football game and you got to have football skills.
Yeah.
But then you're within that, after you find the guys who are good in college, then if you can find the guys who tested well, those guys I think are how, you can project to have success in the NFL because they're professional level talent as far as athletes. And I just think Cowing's got the mix of, production and athleticism where he's going to be really good. It wouldn't surprise me if he were better than Pearsall, even though he's a smaller guy. I really like the Cowing pick. It's funny. The Puni pick is interesting. If he's the real deal, shouldn't he be able to beat out the Feliciano and Burford and start at right guard this year? I mean, that I'll be looking for that. I mean, he's an interesting guy. He's an older player. Many of these guys that they drafted are older players, but the versatility, the nastiness, he had 27 starts in college at left tackle, 13 at left guard, 3 at right tackle. But in the Niners scheme, he probably would be best at right guard because that's where the need is. And I wonder if he can play there. He's never played there before. So, but I love some of the footage of him. He looks nasty. He definitely has movement ability. His dad played football at Towson State. It's an athletic family for sure. All of his brothers and sisters are playing something, it seems like. I really like the Puni pick, and I thought the Mustapha pick, I liked Mustapha a ton when I watched him, but when I saw the interview, I mean, he grew up a Niner fan. Yeah. He's just really mature, really smart. You can see he's like got this intensity about him. I just think that him and Green give the Niners secondary some true leaders, even though they're young players, can be rookies stepping in. I think they're alpha type personalities. And I think they needed that because they lost that with Ward and Mosley. And I think they're gaining that with Green and with Mustapha.
Yeah. And I want to go back to something that you said about like Cowing and Pearsall. And I just think, did Kyle Shanahan look at the tape from the Super Bowl and see how the Chiefs had no fear in playing press man, and with Debo struggling to run routes, and say, we're not going to let that happen again? We're going to get these quick, shifty, agile, fast feet wide receivers who have been productive, who have ball skills, who are refined route runners. And we're just not going to allow other teams to beat us up at the line, because the same thing kind of happened against the Baltimore Ravens too, where the Niners were a little bit bullied there by the Ravens and the Chiefs secondary. And is there a switch in philosophy here? I'm curious about that. And then to Malik Mustapha and Renardo Green, these are 2 players who, again, have played a lot. And I don't want to keep repeating myself, but like this Niners draft class, they prioritize players who have played a lot of football. And they've prioritized bringing in players who fit their identity as far as their culture goes. Swagger, toughness, physicality. Malik Mustapha, he can play, in the box, hybrid linebacker. He was a diverse option on third downs. He has good ball tracking ability, no fear either. I like the physicality that he has. John Lynch said on the call with him, he's like, dude, you're just so yoked. He's a good character guy. Renardo Green, a good character guy. Kyle Shanahan was on the phone with Jacob Cowing and said, we drafted you because of the thank you letter that you wrote us. I'm kidding. It's your game. But, that goes a long way. So they like character. They like culture. That's been clear with all of the leaders that they have, the players that they've extended and paid. And then they like players who just are willing to get grimy, get slimy, get it out of the mud, and exude that type of toughness. And defensively, I think Green's going to be able to give you that. Mustapha as well. And I think with these picks too, you look ahead to 2025. Let's say that Purdy gets a contract extension. Ayuk does as well. Does Pearsall and Cowing replace Debo and Jawan Jennings? Does Renardo Green and Malik Mustapha replace Diamador Lenore and Talanoa Hufanga? Does Dominick Puni replace Aaron Banks? Because all of those players are either up for contracts or for Debo has a lot of money owed to him. And the Niners, in a way, I think are kind of restructuring things a little bit, reshuffling their cards for next off season, where they know that the roster is going to get a little bit financially tight and the core pieces are starting to get a little bit older. So let's replenish that talent with this draft class here.
Was there a sleeper in this draft that you particularly liked, or a pick that you didn't like? Because I was not a fan of the Kingston pick in the 6th round. But I had Todd Husek on the stream last night, who's a former Stanford quarterback, and he was a draft analyst on the radio, this year. And he really likes the Kingston pick. I'll say this. I like the Kingston interview. He's obviously got good strength numbers, 36 reps on the bench, good speed numbers as well. But a short-armed guy who kind of projects inside. They really didn't take a tackle. Puni's a guard. This guy's maybe a guard or a center. Nugent is probably a center. Mays is the Southern Miss offensive lineman as an undrafted guy, is probably a guard. Really, they didn't take a tackle. But what did you think of the Kingston pick?
Yeah, I just don't get the philosophy behind not taking a tackle. And Roger Rosengarten was there if you wanted to trade up. The Chiefs leapfrogged you for Kingsley Suamata'i and that trade that you made with Kansas City. Jarrett Kingston's an interesting player. I also really like Drake Nugent, the Michigan center who started every game last year, was a first-team Big Ten member and didn't have a lot of losses on tape. He's a little bit lighter, but at that center spot, we've seen a kind of a change in philosophy for these teams that are looking for that athletic and agile center, and Shanahan likes to have those types of centers for his team. For Kingston, positional versatility. 16 starts in his career at left guard, 10 at left tackle, 6 at right guard, 5 at right tackle. He's played all along the line, outside of the center position. And also another experienced player, 49 games played, 37 starts, was at Washington State. He was going to come out for the draft in 2022, and then he suffered an injury. So he went back, transferred from Washington State to USC. And him and Dominick Puni, they didn't give up a sack last year. It's pretty impressive. So I think the Niners saw that, and they're like, okay, the production has been there. Now with Puni and Kingston, as we're talking about, shorter arms, shorter wingspan. The Niners like offensive tackles with 34-inch arms. Kingston checked in at 32 and an eighth. The wingspan is under 80 inches. But I think Kingston is a player that you could look out for to maybe play center too, even though he didn't play that position. He's 6'4", 306 and ran a 5.02 40-yard dash. That's really, really good speed for him.